Hey class, it's Mr. Creighton. So what we're going to talk about today is how we can set up two objects and draw them together. So how we can break down the shapes of each individual object, but also draw them the proper size when they're side by side. So one thing we can do right away is when we draw these images, we want to try to balance them out on the paper, and we want to try to use the majority of the paper. So an easy way for us to do this is to make a quick grid. We talked about this earlier before when we worked on non-objective designs. So making that quick grid of 9 rectangles is going to help you set up where these things can go. So now what I'm going to do is traditionally you draw the largest object first. That gives you something to build around. It's just kind of like when we draw or follow the drawing steps. So we always, of course, observe the shapes and sizes. Then we draw the outside or largest one. And then we work our way to the inside parts. Well, in this case, we're going to start with the largest object so we can build around that object. So when I look at this, I'm going to observe them. So right away, when I take a look at the height of this guy here, so this is actually a little plush from when I was younger, and this is a baseball from when I was younger too as well. When I look at these, so this is roughly at least twice the height of this baseball, or twice our length here. So what I want to do is I'm going to draw that big shape, and then as I draw it, I have to be aware that when it's time to set up the baseball, that it's going to be roughly half the size of this big guy here. So remember, we can set up our drawings in basic shapes. So I'm drawing a rectangle, and then I'm going to draw like this egg-like shape on the inside. So we got a big curve below, and then a smaller curve above. So it's kind of like an egg, and I'm leaving some space for the hair as well. Well, this is kind of like what we got. So our basic shape. Press hard so you can see that shape. All right, so I'm going to set up where the baseball's at too as well. So the baseball fits somewhere near the top. I'm going to draw kind of a section. So I'm going to use a rectangle to kind of place this in there. Remember, this is a lot smaller in shape and size. So our baseball fits inside of this area here. I can just kind of go around until I get it round, even if that means going outside of that square. All right, so the two basic shapes are in. So so that now I can kind of check the shapes and sizes. So if I look at this and I double it, so again, this is roughly twice the height of this circle. So I want to make sure I have that before I move forward. So always observe. So after you even draw your initial shapes, come back and observe them before you start adjusting the outside shapes, and of course before you move to any inside details. So what I'm going to do is also I'm going to take a look at this piece here. So there's a piece that goes kind of on the outside. I'm just going to set this up with a rectangle. And then I can just use that rectangle to kind of draw this curve inside. So there's a curve. Just right outside of that. And then we have a little rim. So that's just kind of the basics of this. All right, so what I can start doing is I'm going to start working my way towards the more detailed sections. Now that the general shapes are in place, I'm going to start adding the major shapes and details on this thing. So we do have, if you look at the outside shape, there's these big kind of spikes, which are actually a little bit taller than the baseball. This is actually, believe it or not, a character that I made actually when I was in grade school. So that's what this thing is. His name is Steve. It's based upon my best friend. No, he does not have spiky hair in real life, but he does have pretty big hair. So That's what this stuffed animal here is representing. So this last spike is just maybe a little bit shorter. And it kind of wraps around down here. So the spikes, or the hair that's at the bottom, is closer to the middle of the baseball. So I'm going to use that to set up these areas. So I'm just kind of setting up where these parts are. There's a piece that goes to the edge here. What you'll also notice, this kid has really, really big ears. The ears are, for the most part, similar on the left and the right. So one thing we can do is add kind of a guideline. So I'm going to add a guide on the left, add a guide on the right. And the ears kind of overlap the bottom of the metal piece on the baseball, or the metal stand here. So now when I draw these ears, they're actually going to overlap that stand. So really the key when you're drawing multiple objects, you are going to have to use guides to keep things in place. Because otherwise sometimes drawing multiple things in the same image can get a little bit tricky. But if we can start with the biggest shape first, then we can easily work our way to the smaller shapes, and that's what it comes down to. So for his big egg shape, that red section's a little bit lower than halfway, a little bit lower than the ears. So just kind of getting these major parts in there. For the eyes, I'm going to draw a guideline that goes across. And his eyes line up near the inside of the lobe of the ear. Fill that in. So really our main focus here when draw something like this, again, is to set up the general outside shape. So observe what you're drawing. So observe those shapes. Compare the shapes of those objects because you're going to draw the largest object first. Typically, you'll always draw the largest object first. It gives you something to build around. So that's pretty important, because you'll need a starting point. We always need some place to start. And then once you set up that big object, you can work your way to the smaller object and set that up. Once the space is set up for both of them, you can come in and start adjusting the outside shape. Get your outside shape right. Check it. And once your outside shape is right, then you can work your way to the inside section. So that part's pretty important. So I'm going to erase this because his ear is actually moving on me, because the ear is actually overlapping that. So that's just kind of setting it up. Hopefully you guys can see that for the most part. But really what we're focusing on here is just drawing, again, the objects together. So starting with the outside and then working our way to the inside. But we always want to compare the shapes and sizes first in order to really get this thing working. That part's very, very, very important. So what you guys will do today is you are going to focus on drawing two objects together. So two objects of your choosing. So whatever object you may have at home, you're going to draw those together. So you can choose. Use the entire sketchbook page. So set up that grid similar to what I did in the beginning. And again, that's what you will draw. So you're going to set up the outside. So after you observe, set up the outside shape. and then set up the inside parts and follow those drawing steps that we've learned last week. And as long as you do that, you'll be good to go. So 2 objects, use the entire sheet of paper, and then follow our drawing steps again, which we focused on last week. Observe, outside, inside. And if you can do that, you are totally good to go.